What's up everyone, Alvin Holbrook, tech editor at Velo. We're at Taipei Cycle Show in Taiwan, day 2. Day 1, I spent a whole bunch of time scoping out the latest and greatest, going through all the nooks and crannies. Today, we're gonna show you all the stuff that I'm hoping to try out in 2025. We got some AI tech, we've got a whole bunch of drivetrains, we got recycled tires that are really, really fast. You excited? Because so am I. It's also really hot. Let's go. All right, we're all looking for a little bit extra power. I'm not sure that I would expect to see this in the world tour anytime soon, but this company and this thing that's called the booster crank is said to improve your pedaling force by 50%. Now, it's got this thing right here that looks awfully happy to see me, but what's inside is a set of synchronized gears and a rod internally that is said to multiply whatever force you're putting into your pedals. It is an interesting idea, and it's something that, you know, you come to Taipei Cycle Show to see. And so I'm glad to see it, even though I am not sure I'm gonna put it on my bike anytime soon. Look at these handlebars. 245 grams claimed. I've actually ridden some black tech stuff on the Haro Revette. We did a review of it last year, and I actually quite like the ergonomics of those black tech bars. They've been around for the past few years. They partner with a company in Taiwan called Trigun that makes frames. They have like an aero dimpling to them, kind of like a zip wheel, but just 245 grams. That is usually the weight of a high-end carbon handlebar, but to get that and the one-piece carbon stem built into is pretty darn impressive. All right, let's keep going.
Where are we going now?
Oh, good question. Oh, we're gonna go look at an AI camera thing. Let me look. Yeah, I gotta figure out where that is. Some booster crank details. Yeah, let's go look at an AI-driven rear camera sensor. AI. All right, one of the most interesting things that I've found so far is from a company called Velo. Oddly enough, they make saddles, not like bike content like we do. And they have what they're calling an AI like powered camera system. And if you take a look at that right there, you've got a bunch of arrows right there, and you can see me approaching. So that arrow right there is saying, hey, there's someone coming up right behind you. It'll get you on the sides as well, and it'll have lights on either side to let you know if you're riding that there's obstacles or that there's a car approaching you. So pretty cool to see something like this built into your standard smartphone. As you can see right now, this is pretty much a prototype because you have a fairly like bulky camera system and you have a battery that's independent of the Bosch motor that's on this turn quick haul right here. But I wouldn't be surprised if we see this like get developed pretty quickly, and not only that, but I wouldn't be surprised to see it integrated into an e-bike system, or at least, you know, that's what I think should happen. One more thing I just realized as we were heading out is that it'll actually like vibrate at the grips to let you know that something is approaching, so you don't need to keep your eyes on the camera. It'll tell you at the grips on like what side that something is approaching. That is really cool, and that's something that I wouldn't have thought to have used, but I'm glad it's here. 3D printed bikes, I-111, let's go. Another hot topic, 2025, people love 3D printing. 3D printed titanium components are pretty common these days. We're seeing more and more, be it built into a titanium frame or as a standalone component. This has some of the best finished 3D printed titanium components or anything that I've seen in quite some time. Let's go look. All right, so this comes from a factory called TSB Technology. Their in-house brand is called Laggett. And this right here, believe it or not, is 3D printed titanium. You don't see really any like types of like edges or anything like that. If you run your finger over it, you can kind of feel when it goes from tube to another tube. But looking at it even pretty close, you can't tell. And if you were to like, you know, paint it in a specific way, the only tell I would say that something is titanium as opposed to carbon would be like the inset logos that you get something like the head tube right here. And so they've also got some pretty nifty like anodization for the logos, as well as the senior handmade thing on the inside of the chainstay. If we go over here, you can see a little bit more about how good of a job they're doing with 3D printed titanium. So you're getting stuff like this two-piece stem right here, as well as the integrated bar. Both of those are 3D printed titanium as well. You go over here, you have a view of like the different joints that are going on. So you have like bottom brackets, head tubes, like dropouts, that type of thing. It's all really impressive and really clean looking, especially compared to stuff I've seen like as recently as last year at Eurobike. This is really, really good. If you go over here, you have other stuff, like this would be a cover for like an e-bike system for a mid-drive motor. You also have all these 3D printed bits right here for entrance for brake hoses or that type of thing as well. One of my favorite things I've found here is not only this 3D printed crank set that they have, but they also have this 3D printed one-piece carbon handlebar. It doesn't look dissimilar to what you'd find from a Reval Rapide cockpit, the one-piece bar and stem, but instead of carbon fiber, you got titanium, you get to flex on your friends, hardcore. So we talked a little bit more with them, and a full frame that we've talked about that has that super smooth finish takes about 40 hours just to print all the components, and then from start to finish it takes about a month just to like polish everything down, get everything connected, do all the testing that they need to as well. I think that's pretty cool. And then when I mentioned that like underplate for a mid-drive motor on an e-bike, they were saying that takes about 4 days to print start to finish, but then you get 27 sets right there. And then that one-piece handlebar is like 48 hours start to finish as well. All right, next one, we're going upstairs. 4 though? I think that's right. Yeah, that's gotta be it. It's weird because you're basically on the first floor here or the 4th floor, and I have no idea how to get to any of the floors in between. And I'm not really sure if they exist either. Oh, this is the 3rd floor. This is the 3rd floor. All right, 4. Did you press 3?
You did.
You pressed
all of them. Look at them all. You pressed all of them.
Bro, what the It's 11:47 and I'm falling apart. All right, so you're showing up to this recycled carbon fiber bike and it looks like it got shrunk in the washer, I think. There it is. It's a kid's bike. It doesn't even have a drivetrain. So it's $500 kid's bike from Giant. It's made from recycled carbon fiber, which to this point, the only bikes or bike components I've seen made of recycled carbon fiber are tire levers. So to see not only like the handlebar, but also the wheels as well as the frame be made of a recycled carbon fiber is really impressive. The big thing here is the potential for this construction to be pushed to other components. When I talk to Giant about this, they don't expect to see this injection molded like recycled carbon fiber in frames anytime soon for myriad reasons, but they said we wouldn't be surprised if we start seeing it in places like handlebars, stems, seat posts, even like carbon fiber rims in the future, not only because of the recyclability and the recycled nature of it, but because of the damping properties and the relatively low weight and high strength that they're able to get with this injection molded system right here. One last thing I need to mention is that there's a lot of recycled carbon fiber here, but there's other parts where they're able to cut their CO2 emissions compared to a standard component. So you have stuff like this tire right here, which is made out of like discarded ocean plastics built into this. You have things like the foam in here that use fewer carbon emissions in its production, the grips, fewer carbon emissions as well. You know, there's not that many components on this bike because it doesn't have a drivetrain, but again, cool to see that they're able to cut out carbon emissions where possible and still make a bike that is frankly really rad. Next up is Wheeltop. Wheeltop's one of the 2 drivetrain manufacturers out here that I think can really like push against the big 2.5 of like SRAM, Shimano, and Campagnolo. So we've got some wired and wireless drivetrains. This Wheeltop group I think is really interesting because you can kind of put whatever cassette you want on it, and I'll explain how that works. What I've got here is a new gravel group set from a company called Wheeltop, the Chinese drivetrain company that's been around for a few years. If you actually look at a Pink Bike video from 2019, you'll see Mike Levy playing around with a wireless electronic shift system, derailleur and shifter, where you press the button and it would take like a decade to shift, and that is no longer the case here. You're getting a lot of shifting going on here actually. Ooh, there we go. So you can see it's actually pretty darn quick right there. So what this is, fully wireless. You have a battery right here that is built into the system, but if the battery breaks, you can replace it pretty easily. You have a new brake caliper right here in this like bluish grayish finish that looks awfully like early generation SRAM GX, if I'm honest. And then you have this derailleur that I mentioned that is like Wheeltop's GEX system right here. So they actually have two different derailleur cages that you can choose from. One that'll shift up to a 46 tooth 1x cassette, or another one that'll shift a 52 tooth. Now I hinted at the fact that this is like able to pair with whatever cassette you want, and that's because if you go on the Wheeltop app, you can actually pair this like shift lever right here, or this derailleur, to work with anything between a 3-speed cassette and a 14-speed cassette. As long as it has the chain wrap to match, it'll work with whatever like cassette you want to use. I think that is pretty sweet. That's something that a lot of brands, or a lot of people, have wanted from bike brands like Shimano and SRAM for years. Cross compatibility with different things, and Wheeltop's letting you do that for a fairly affordable price. And so you see this stuff right here and you think, okay, maybe it's made in China. Is it gonna make it to North America? Here's the thing, they recently bought Rotor, the company that makes like high-end Spanish-based like cranks and power meters and whatnot. They're owned by Wheeltop now. And so I wouldn't be surprised to see more of this hit Western shores pretty quickly. All right, so that was Wheeltop, the crazy customizable, wireless, inexpensive gravel group set that I think a lot of people have been looking for. That's pretty cool. We also have an updated gravel group set to come from L2, as well as I want to take a stop by Vittoria because they have a high performance recycled tire that we saw last year that should be ready for production later this year, and they've got a sample here. Let's go. So you might be wondering why we're not directly in the show, and it's because Vittoria's booth isn't directly in the show. They showed us some new tires that we'll talk about later down here, but the biggest thing that I want to talk about is a tire that we saw last year. This is part of Vittoria's revamped Terreno lineup. This is the Terreno Pro, which, like the Corsa Pro in their lineup, indicates that it's their fastest, highest end tire. The interesting thing here that you'll see here is that this isn't black. It's actually this brownish natural material, and that's because it's made of 92% renewable and recycled materials. So things like recycled fishnets make their way into here. There's also renewable ways of rubber compounds here as well. And it happens to be their fastest tire. This is their T60 version, which means that it's not a slick, it's not their fully aggressive mud tire, it's right down the middle. This looks ready to go. Vittoria tells us it's not ready for the market yet. We're hoping that this comes out later this year and we'll be able to ride it when it is. All right, Max is behind the camera. Max, I don't know if you remember this, but at Field Test, which we recently shot, which you should see soonish, I was talking about how on the Specialized Roubaix it has this like riser handlebar that I was pretty into. And a lot of people are saying, oh, I don't get it. I don't understand why they did that. Why don't they just add more head tube length? Well, look at this. Black Tech, of all companies, has a riser bar too. And it looks pretty darn good. So to the haters, rise up. We got this. Let's go. All right, so next up is L2. This is another component drivetrain company that you may not have heard of, but I wouldn't be surprised if you start seeing it more often, especially in the next year, because of how polished their drivetrain components are getting. Most recently, they've updated their ERX group set, which is their gravel group set. They've updated it with revised levers right here using mineral oil right here. You also have wired derailleurs front and rear, but there is a central battery. But the big update here is that if you take a look at this front derailleur, it actually has a USB-C plug, so you don't have to fiddle around looking for a proprietary plug like you might with a Shimano or something like that. If you want a 1x drivetrain, L2 has you covered, although that's on the mountain bike side. We're gonna talk about that nonetheless, because I still think it's pretty exciting. So if you wanna follow me over here. Key things here, huge rear derailleur right here. This battery is actually removable. You take a look, that's also a USB-C plug, so you can charge it that way too. Plug that in, ready to go. You've got your levers right here. There is no cross compatibility with the gravel group set that they're telling me as of now. I wouldn't be surprised if we see more of this down the line, however, especially considering that they already have developed some sort of wireless drivetrain. All right, that's it for this video. at Taipei Cycle Show. It's noon. If you couldn't tell, I'm tired, I'm hungry. Max has got a whole bunch to edit. Stay tuned for more videos from myself as well as Shoddy Dave. We're milling about, we're looking for the coolest things. That's it, let's go. velodieoutsideinline.com, got written articles, photos, and more that you should go check out too.